Hurricane Irene in 2011. This was the smallest demonstration on this day we did last year of people who felt the effects of climate change. And I include it just because it's not like it's a street in Haiti that's turned into a nasty muddy river with the continued flooding there. It was the signs that those kids were holding that got me. It just said, your actions affect me. And that's true. More people died from Hurricane Sandy in Haiti than died in New York. There's still a big cholera outbreak underway in its wake. Your actions affect me, but not the other way around. There's nothing that anyone can do in Haiti really to affect the outcome of this except appeal to our best instincts. They can't cut back on fossil fuel, they hardly use any. They don't have the capitals of the world's biggest economies within easy reach to go protest at. They don't have endowments to divest fossil fuel stock from. That's become the other great movement that's been spreading out for the last 18 months around the world as colleges, universities, churches, states, and counties and things begin to divest their holdings just as they did 30 years ago when the issue was apartheid. When we try and go play not just defense against bad projects, but offense against the political power of these companies. That's why it's good that people here at McMaster are thinking about this place joining the many other colleges and universities that have divested their fossil fuel stock. It's why it was very good news this past summer when the World Council of Churches, representing 580 million Christians, divested their stock. It's why it was great news 1 week ago Sunday when the Rockefeller family announced that this was the greatest fossil fuel fortune there ever was. And they said, we no longer think it's moral or, for that matter, economically wise to be invested in this. If you've reached the point where the Rockefellers don't feel it's okay, then the rest of us have little excuse, for this kind of thing. And it's why it's extraordinarily good news what happened. I don't think that the slides got in there. I think they're still too fresh. It's why it's extraordinarily good news what happened in New York 10 days ago. Not just New York. There were demonstrations in 2,600 spots around the globe in 170 countries. There were a couple of thousand people in Toronto at a beautiful demonstration on this day of the People's Climate March. And as we were marching down 6th Avenue in the big video screen, we could see people from Toronto, from Mumbai, from New Guinea, from Melbourne, from London, from Paris, people all over the world marching too. But I got to tell you, that event in New York was very, very special. It was the largest rally by far about climate change by a factor of 4. There were 400,000 people or so on hand. It was the largest rally about anything political in the United States in many years. A demonstration that as we come together, we begin to feel enough courage that we take on that kind of internal dread and start rising up. And it was beautiful to see it. And one of the things that was most beautiful about it was it really was a people's climate march. That's what we called it. There were no speeches, there was no stage, it was just people marching. And the first ranks, the first 10 blocks worth of people was all First Nations people who have earned that right to be in the first rank because they've been trying to tell us for a very long time that we are screwing up, that our inability to restrain ourselves is bringing us to woe. And behind them or with them, people from what we call frontline communities, people whose communities have felt the real brunt of its effects already, and they're almost always poor communities and communities of color. Although that's changing quickly as more and more places now get hit and hit hard. But everybody was there. big religious, with groups of scientists marching in their lab coats, tired of their warnings being ignored. Young people, there were, we think, at least 50,000 college students from all around the eastern part of this continent there on hand. It just could not have been more beautiful and more diverse. And as I watched it go by, it really struck me that this was the kind of antibodies starting to kick in, on a planet that's running truly terrible fever. That the antibodies against all the hubristic problems that we face, this chief among them are conscious human beings who have decided that they want to decide these questions democratically and in the open, and that they want to participate in that discussion. And I hope that you all will thank all of you who are already doing it, and I hope that all of you will figure out ways to do it. And some of them will be beautiful, like marching, and some of them will be a little tougher, like many campaigns, like the brave people in Hong Kong today. Sometimes it requires being willing to take deeper steps than that. I'll just finish, since I'm looking around at the beautiful demographic diversity of this room, I'll just finish by saying, I wrote the letter asking people to come get arrested in Washington at the beginning of that keystone. Not an easy letter to write. And one of the things I said in that letter was, I don't think college students should have to be the cannon fodder here. If you're 22 right now in our economy, maybe an arrest record is not really the best thing for your resume, One of the few unmixed blessings of growing older is, past a certain point, what the hell are they going to do to you? And so it was with great pleasure that I watched a lot of people with hairlines like mine, we did not ask people, how old are you, because that would be rude, but we did cleverly, I think, say, who was president when you were born? And the two biggest cohorts were from the FDR and the Truman administrations. Now, my Canadian, it's sort of like from the, like the Diefenbaker era, or, something. And, on the last day, there was a guy arrested who had a sign around his neck that said, World War II vet, handle with care. He was so old that he'd been born in the Warren Harding administration, which I'd forgotten that there even was a Warren Harding administration, It was beautiful to see, and it was beautiful for the young people who were there to see elders acting like elders in the way that we need around all of these questions. Because we could go back, I've rambled on too long, but we could go back and have many of the same discussions about the changes we're making at the smallest cellular levels too, and about whether they're as wise as we think they are. It requires the same kind of concentrated thought and the same kind of democratic deliberation that we should be applying also to energy around those things. We have in the end the right to screw up. And it's quite possible that we will screw up. I cannot guarantee you in this climate fight or any other that we will win. We've waited a very long time to get started. But I can guarantee you that there's going to be a fight, that there are enough people around the world who are willing to act to make sure that there is a real debate about these things. And that's, at the very least, the thing that we should ask for. Not to do things of this momentous stature in the dark with our eyes half closed, or maybe even squeezing our eyes shut so we don't have to see it. We should do it out in the open and just see whether that human ability, that self-restraint, won't be enough to kind of seize the day. In a certain way, and here I will end, this is all a sort of test of whether the big brain turned out to be a good idea or not. You know, it can definitely get us in a lot of trouble. The question is whether it's attached, I guess, to a big enough heart to get us out of some of that trouble too. And that's what we will find out over the next few years. And the way we'll find out is by finding out what percentage of us are really willing to take a stand and go to work. So thanks to all of you, and I look forward to standing shoulder to shoulder with you in the work ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
I did leave enough time for at least a few questions or comments or critiques or abuse or whatever it is, and you feel free to let me have it because I haven't spared you a bit of anything. Christine, is it there's a microphone back there? That's how it's. So I think if you line up there, or if you've got a, that may be the easiest way for everybody to hear. You fire away.
Your presentation gave us a nice overview of some of the environmental challenges facing us now. However, one thing I was concerned about is that your lack of mentioning is the probably the biggest source of pollution, waste of human and material resources, human suffering, environmental damage today is the arms race, continuous warfare, especially when most of this warfare is concerned around control of possibly fossil fuels primarily.
Absolutely. I think you hit on it very smartly at the end there. One of the beautiful things that will happen if we make this transition off of fossil fuel quickly to solar power and wind power and things is the replacement of centralized, think about why the world looks the way it does. One of its main features is the fact that we rely on an energy source that only exists in a few places, very concentrated in those places, and has given rise to huge pools of not just carbon, but of wealth and of power that comes with it. The renewable energy that replaces it, hopefully, is almost by definition a little more spread out and decentralized and democratic, and I think helps move us in many good directions, including the one that you're getting at there.
Okay, just one more quick point. Perhaps, well, I feel the environmental movement needs to politicize more, to take a stand on certain issues like the arms race. And you did mention a few times about China and Hong Kong. So in a sense, you did politicize your talk to a small degree, but you need to mention about the continuous arms race, I think, more, you know, what's happening now, legal wars, like what happened in Iraq, the catastrophe now, and what's happening over in the Middle East is a direct result of all this. So keep up the good work, but I think you need to unite with the arms race.
I got to tell you the truth. I got to tell you the truth, which is I'm already overstretched. And we need a lot of people working on a lot of things. It would be folly to count on me to get very much. I have my hands full with, Exxon and TransCanada. We'll keep working. We work across a lot of issues, and one of the beautiful things about this march in New York was that for the first time, there was a big contingent of people from the peace movement and a lot of people from the labor movement, and it was beautiful to see. But I just warn you not to count much on me. As you can tell, I'm a little worn out just doing what I'm doing. Understand?
Is what can or should individuals do to keep, to help in a practical way to change the carbon footprint? And I say do, not talk about it.
Well, here's what I think. I mean, you can answer that your own way, and I assume that most of you have done many of the things that are sort of obvious. You know, changed your light bulbs. Maybe like me, you've changed them twice. We went to contact fluorescence, and now we have LEDs everywhere. Maybe you eat lower on the food chain than you used to, which would be a good idea. Maybe you drive a Prius, or you take public transportation, or you ride a bike, or, you know, those are all important and good things, and things that I try to do. But I also try to tell them not to fool myself that those are actually stopping climate change. They're not. This is a structural and systemic problem. If we're going to solve it in the time that physics has given us, it's going to be a structural and systemic solution that will involve, above all, finally putting a price on carbon that reflects the damage it does in the atmosphere. Something that every economist has recommended to do. And that's a political act. That can only happen when we break the power of the fossil fuel industry to stop that kind of change. I mean, they understand that this is a political fight. That's why Chevron gave the largest single campaign contribution in American history 2 weeks before the last federal election to make sure the House stayed in the hands of climate deniers. It's why the Koch brothers, who are the biggest leaseholders in the Alberta tar sands, are also the biggest players in American politics. I guess the point I'm trying to make is the most important thing an individual can do is not be an individual. Come together with other people and form a movement. I mean, the people from 350 Hamilton are right outside, ready to, you know, sign you up and get you to work. Form a movement, because that's what's going to do it. It's not going to be done one of us at a time. If we had 100 years, that would be the way to do it. But we don't have 100 years, and so that informs the choices we need to make.
Is there any merit in retrieving carbon from the CO2 and returning it to the soil?
Well, of course there is. I mean, that's what trees in the ocean do, and one of the problems we're really worried about now is that their ability to do that seems to be breaking down some as we heat the planet. And there are some other ways to do it. There are ways in which we could change land use practices some to take somewhat more carbon out of the atmosphere, but the real problem is how much we're pouring in. It's like a bathtub. Yes, we can drain some through some of those ways, but since we've got the spigot wide open at the moment, it can't ever begin to catch up. If we did everything right from this point in terms of switching off fossil fuel, getting off it by about 2030 altogether, which is just at the outside utter realm of the kind of imaginable, then by the end of the century, forests and oceans should sequester enough carbon to get us back down below 350. There'll be a ton of damage done in the meantime, but maybe not the kind that wrecks civilizations. That's our hope anyway. So that's why, I mean, there's a million different ways to come at this, but that's why when we triage it, taking on the fossil fuel industry is job 1, 2, and 3.